everyone talks about shorter attention spans now, yet at the same time, people will sit down and watch a 3-hour Joe Rogan podcast, or they will binge watch 14 straight hours of TV. And they were making the case for saying, is it that there's a shorter attention span or a shorter interest span? And you have to be more interesting up front in order to get people to stick around for their attention.
Are you a scaling SaaS founder? Ready to make the leap from leading a team to leading an organization? Join us each week as we refill your think tank with actionable tips and strategies from great business minds you know and those who don't know yet. This is SaaS Fuel with your host, 5-time entrepreneur, SaaS founder, and globetrotting adventurer, Jeff Maines.
Welcome back to the SaaS Fuel podcast, where the best brands, like the best emojis, make an impact with just the right touch, memorable, expressive, and sometimes just impossible to ignore. I'm your host, Jeff Maines. I help B2B SaaS founders like you grow from traction to scale. Here, growth is more than just numbers. It's about crafting a future-proof company, premium valuation, and leaders who build businesses of significance while living epic, adventurous lives. Why do some pitches captivate investors instantly while others put them to sleep in the first 30 seconds? It's not about having the best numbers or the slickest deck. It's about storytelling. And no, we're not talking about spinning fairy tales. We're talking about crafting a pitch that makes investors feel something, that makes customers see themselves in your solution. And that turns a simple conversation into a compelling journey that they want to be a part of. In this episode, we're diving into the art and science of storytelling with someone who knows how to make pitches unforgettable. You'll learn how to use the K-PASA formula to make your audience feel seen, why micro stories can be more powerful than big, long, drawn-out stories or an endless list of stats, and how structuring your pitch like a video game keeps people engaged instead of zoning out. Plus, we'll talk about why your revenue narrative needs a serious makeover, because just saying you have traction, that's not enough. If you've ever struggled to make your startup story land with investors, customers, or even your own team, this episode is about to change the way you communicate it forever. Let's get into it. Our founder on Tuesday was David Hirschfeld, founder of Techies Corp and creator of the Launch First system. David shared how startups can go from concept to cash flow in months, not years. David explained the key mistakes that cause most startups to fail and what to do about them, and how founders can use high-fidelity prototypes, market validation, and early adopters to launch successfully. Our expert guest last week was James Wilton, pricing strategist and former expert at McKinsey & Company. He actually led their pricing practice. James broke down the role of pricing as a growth lever. He explained how SaaS companies can monetize new products, optimize perceived value, and avoid the biggest pricing mistakes that kill conversions. If you miss either of those episodes, go back and check them out. Such good value there. My guest today is Rajiv Nathan, known as the voice of startup culture and the founder of Startup Hype Man. He helps startups craft unforgettable pitches that attract investors, customers, and partners. Named an agent of change by Huffington Post, Raj has delivered a TED Talk, been featured in Inc. and Forbes, and brings his storytelling expertise from hip-hop, yoga, and MMA announcing. Whether you're pitching to raise capital or stand out in a crowded marketplace, Rajiv's insights will change the way you tell your startup story. Welcome, Startup Hype Man, Raj Nation, Rajiv Nathan. Hey, Rajiv, welcome to SaaS Fuel.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Well, you built a career blending storytelling, hip-hop, and startup pitching. What's the common thread between performing on stage and pitching to investors?
Good question. The common thread is a really strongly held, deep-rooted belief in the power of expression. So years ago, I kind of did like a pretty deep dive into my own why. And what I landed on is that the reason that I really believe I'm on this earth is to create more expression in the world. And I'm going to do that through being very expressive myself in different ways, but also helping others express themselves. And then what's stacked on top of that is, or like what helps channel that why of expression is various forms of storytelling, which those different things that you mentioned are all just outputs, manifestations of storytelling. So I would say that's the A-B rhythm of my life and my work is storytelling in the name of expression, expression through storytelling.
Very cool. I like that. The two really build on each other.
It's almost hard for me to say I could have one without the other. And that's
Sure.
not going to be the case for everyone, but for me personally, it's almost like I don't know any other way. And even when I'm not even intentionally trying to do some of these things, they just come out. So like, here's an example. I also teach yoga.
Okay.
And once I got my footing as a yoga teacher, meaning like, I learned how to teach a class. I got past the initial like I think any yoga teacher, their first year teaching, they're just like in a panic they're just like, can I get to the end of a class without freaking out? And then you hit a point where you actually see your students across from you. You don't just like, it's not just like a blackout. So once you get past that phase, you get an opportunity to really like figure out what kind of teacher you want to be or you gravitate towards naturally. And for me, it's very hard now to teach a class without having some type of theme and short narrative that I offer at the very beginning. And
Wow,
then
that's fantastic.
the entire class is then constructed around that theme. And there will be certain poses that are, I don't have to explicitly say it, but I know that I'm using that posture to help echo or call back to the theme at the beginning. And then I'll kind of put these reminders for the students throughout. I'll have them come back to that. And I would say it's a little bit more than just saying set an intention. It's actually creating like almost like a motif or an environment for them to operate within. And that's what, a lot of my students in class, I've asked them before, like, what keeps you coming back, or what do you think makes these classes different? Why do you like these classes? And a lot of them come back saying, I like that it's more than just the postures.
Yeah.
And for me personally, it's not like I was like, how do I make this storytelling? It just naturally happened that I made it storytelling.
That would definitely be something worth coming back for. And it's a lot more that it differentiates you for sure, but it's a lot more than just the norm or the expectation. And so it's taking it up a level. I think storytelling matters now, maybe more than ever before. It's always been important, but there's a very noisy marketplace in business, and the power of storytelling. Why did so many SaaS founders not really fully embrace storytelling and communicating their company vision?
I think a lot of founders operate in this like product development bubble,
Mm.
and they think of everything through the lens of product development, and you should develop your product through the lens of product development. But it's almost like if you're if you're only getting advice from venture capitalists, if you're only getting advice from other people running companies, and I'm not saying it's bad advice, listen to those people. But when it comes to the communication side of it, those people are like 0.1% of the overall population that you need to be getting in front of. And this is where you get, storytelling dies in favor of, well, let me tell you all these things we're building. Let me tell you all these features that we have. And then I think that compounds with the fact that since you're the one developing it or your team is developing it, you get really excited because you spent all this time working on this thing. So you want to talk about, this new feature ad that you've got. And it's not necessarily what your customers care about. And a lot of times it's not what investors care about either.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think a lot of pitches are I don't know, maybe a little bit boring or a lot boring. It is, and demos are kind of the same way. It's just kind of a bunch of features and stuff. And how do we make those brilliant? Is there a way to make a pitch memorable and engaging? Do you have a formula, or how do you do
Yeah.
that?
So let's take a look first at what the average pitch sounds like. Now, if it's talking to an investor, the average someone's going to start by saying something like, yeah, so we're disrupting a $46 billion TAM, and we are an AI-powered load logistics generation platform, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot of words. Like, it's a lot of words that don't necessarily mean anything. And I'm going to tell everyone right now, if the first thing you tell people about is your TAM, I don't care if it's an investor. First off, it's not a differentiation. Everyone who might want to talk to an investor for the purpose of supporting their company has a large TAM. So it's not a differentiator. It's table stakes. Don't lead with table stakes. It's also not only not unique to you / differentiator. If you're still in the early stages, like let's say you're Series A or below, I promise you haven't disrupted anything. So like if you position it as we're disrupting an X billion-dollar TAM,
right?
The only thing you have disrupted is your personal bank account because you've probably spent a lot of money building this thing.
Yep, that's right.
So don't tell people what you're doing is disruptive. If they recognize that's disruptive, fine. Take the compliment, say thank you, glad you appreciate that. Don't tell other people you're disruptive. It just sounds so like, I don't know, at this point it sounds ridiculous to say that yourself.
Yeah.
So that's the investor side, is a lot of times it opens with that. On the customer side, you will often hear introductions that will sound something like, and they'll sound a little bit similar. They'll probably just wipe out the TAM part, and they'll say things like, yeah, so we're an AI-powered app that does this, and this. And what's interesting is in both cases, there's no kind of regard for, or not regard, there's no intention or consideration behind the energy or the emotion you're putting behind it. It's almost like what you're saying it as an afterthought to yourself. Yeah, so we do this, and this. Yeah, we're a whatever. We're a SaaS platform that does X, Y, and Z. We're an AI-powered SaaS business networking, two-way communication platform app database. And you'll notice when you talk like that, people don't necessarily respond with interest. You might get someone here and there, but it sounds like what they've heard before, or it's hard to decipher. So they don't know where to take it. And particularly like if you're selling, this is where you can change the face of your discovery calls. If you're selling SaaS and selling B2B SaaS in particular, at the beginning of that call, near the beginning of that call, you'll have to give them some introduction of your company. Yes, you want them to like talk first, do discovery, all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But you got to give them something. You can't just be like, I'm going to tell you nothing until you tell me stuff about your company. You haven't earned that right.
Right.
So just saying that, throw away 1, 2, or 3 liner isn't going to help your case for getting quality discovery. And this is where your question around like strategy or formula, this is where, whether it's in this case or even with investors, like I mentioned before, the formula that I developed several years ago that works time and time again, whether it is in the pursuit of raising capital or gathering the interest of customers, is I call it the K-PASA elevator pitch formula.
I like that. K-PASA.
So K-PASA. So, Jeff, do you know in Spanish what K-PASA means?
Yeah. So that's how's it going?
Yeah, exactly. How's it going? What's up?
Yeah.
So that's what you have to do here, is tell people what's up. What's up with them, therefore what's up with you. So K-PASA is an acronym. The PASA is the acronym, which stands for Problem, Approach, Solution, Action. Problem, Approach, Solution, Action. So when you communicate through that format, what you're doing, and I'll tell you, this is actually designed to be a minute or less. And if you're like, a full minute, no one's going to listen for a minute. I've been told 10 seconds or less. 10 seconds or
if you're
less.
Boring, that's true.
Exactly, right? Yeah. If what you're saying is boring, disinteresting, if it's annoying, don't talk for more than 10 seconds.
Right.
If
get it out there quick, run.
Right. If it's interesting, if it has intrigue, if it has merit, they're going to be hanging on for your every word, and they won't realize a minute has passed.
Right.
I saw, actually, very coincidentally, I saw a tweet yesterday that was like, everyone talks about shorter attention spans now, yet at the same time, people will sit down and watch a 3-hour Joe Rogan podcast, or they will binge watch 14 straight hours of TV. And they were making the case for saying, is it that there's a shorter attention span or a shorter interest span? And you have to be more interesting up front in order to get people to stick around for their attention. So in this K-PASA formula, kind of drafting off that, you're making yourself interesting up front, and doing so by actually holding off talking about your product. I know it sounds weird, but in this formula, again, it's problem, approach, solution, action. You start with them. You start with the problem that exists in the market. You start with the problem they are probably experiencing. And then you use that as the entry point to talk about what your offering is. So the approach is going to be like a catchy one-liner. That's your 10,000 foot overview of what you offer. And then the solution is your actual product. What does it do? How does it help? And then action is a call to action. So if you're using this at the beginning of a discovery call, your call to action would be as simple as, does that help for a high level overview? Or has that, have you ever experienced some of those things I was talking about? Yeah. And what that's going to do in a discovery call for a SaaS demo, or a discovery section of a demo call, is open up the proverbial floodgates for them to tell you about their situation. Because here's the key with this, and I'll get to the investor side in a moment, but here's the key. The reason why this formula works is because you are making them feel seen. Wow. And that's the unlock here. It's that we all think what we need to do is make ourselves sound impressive. We need to make ourselves look flashy. We need to convince them, quote unquote. Yeah. The reality is we need to focus on making them feel seen, because when a person feels seen, they will trust you with their time, their energy, their information, and ultimately their money. So now you get into this discovery process, and they're going to say, that's so helpful that you said that. It's actually very similar to what we've been going through over the last 2-3 months, and yada, 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 right? The initial guard they have up, it's going to lower down, and they're going to invite you into their world. So often what stops a sale from ever materializing is the prospect does not feel comfortable inviting you into their world, and they just give you surface level responses to your questions because you haven't really earned the right to know more. Right. How often in an everyday situation do you meet someone new on the internet and tell them the deepest things that are happening in your life? Which is how a demo call gets set up, right? It's someone new you essentially met on the internet, either through cold email or outbound or through inbound marketing. And now you expect that person to tell you everything about them and their situation and their deepest, darkest secrets, more or less. We don't do that in real life, right? Everyone, right. To the extent that the general advice for years has been, on a first date, what do you avoid? Religion and politics, which you could kind of say is people's deepest, darkest thoughts. Sure. Or not dark in the worst way, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, the most intimate conversation. I mean, it's really, it's much deeper in than, you would talk to a stranger necessarily.
And it's not until you know someone a little bit better do you feel, does that, the thing is, if you talk about some of these things way too soon and you haven't established any sort of familiarity with the other person, they may take it out of context. They may not understand you the right way, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm all for getting deep as early as possible as a human being, because I'm not much for, I really don't love small talk and talking about the weather and things like that. Yeah. But I also understand the nature of making someone feel comfortable first. And so bringing this back to sales, the K-PASA elevator pitch formula is how you make them feel comfortable, and and through that comfort, through feeling seen, they now open up a lot more about what's going on their side. And that's going to influence now the demo that you give as a result.
Right.
So that's
Right.
that's on the sales side. All right. And now let's come back to the investor side for a moment.
And those are
With
different
investors,
pitches.
yeah.
The investor and prospect, different pitches, different needs, different messaging, same formula.
Well, here's the interesting thing. You can actually use basically the same message for both.
Okay.
And what you do is you tell the investor, here's how we pitch our customers. And now they
I
see
like
you have
that.
a message already figured out for your customers.
Yeah.
And if you do this the right way, it sounds really good. And they're going to be so impressed because it matters way less. Again, coming back to like whether you're going to say disruptive AI or AI disruption, which don't say either, but like it matters so much less that you have that stuff like dialed in for an investor. It matters so much more if you can have your customer messaging dialed in and then put that in front of an investor. The one change you might make is, I would say, when talking to an investor, this just came up a couple days ago, actually. You want to give them, like, let's say your product's just like the version 1.0 right now, but you know you're going to be at 2.0 or 3, like your actual
Sure.
vision is like the 2.0 or the 3.0 version. Add in like talk about the product, like in the S, the solution of the K-PASA.
Yep.
Talk about what the product is supposed to be as if it is that today, as opposed to like, today we're only at this, but we're going to be this later. If you're talking to a customer, just tell them what the product is today. You don't need to like roadmap them up front.
Sure.
Because you're trying to get them to buy today on what you have. But with the investor, you can adjust that solution language so that you're talking about the big picture solution. You know, maybe it's a couple of years from now, but you're talking about that as if it's today. And if you're hearing that and wondering, well, aren't I lying then? Because you don't have that today? No, the reality is you're going to be that. And an investor is, what you're doing is, with any of these introductions, is creating space to further the conversation. And in that furthered conversation is when you would clarify, today we're here and we've got plans to get to there. But
Okay.
an investor is not, if they were to give you money, they're not investing in your beta. They're not investing in your 1.0. They're investing in the world you are trying to build.
Absolutely.
So give them that world that you are trying to build. But aside from that tweak, you can put nearly the same message in front of an investor that you would in front of a customer. And I would bet you will have more success than trying to figure out a totally, completely custom elevator pitch, intro story, whatever you want to call it, for the investor versus the customer.
I think that's really smart. One, it's a lot easier. And I think you're right, because you're really pitching them like you would. You're showing them what the vision is that you're building for your customers. And they look at it, and that's really what they're interested in, is our customers going to buy this thing? And when you can give them a really solid pitch and explain the problem, how you're solving it, what the approach is, how you're solving it, the next steps, it's a no-brainer. Instead of going in and pitching, you sound like everybody else that's going in there and talking about all the other stuff you were mentioning before. With TAM I laugh when I hear that. I mean, we have a giant TAM. It's massive.
Don't
Every
swing your
company
big
does.
TAM energy.
Right. My TAM is bigger than yours. It's just so dumb, because it's irrelevant. It's, are people going to buy it? And when you're giving them that same pitch you're giving the customers, then I think you're really unlocking something in there, and you sound different than everybody else who's trying to pitch.
And it's a 2-for-1 on your side. Why
Yeah.
spend all this time creating completely unique messages for both when you can double your efforts with one message? And, again, TAM is important for an investor, but it's table stakes. They do not need to hear that up front. You could reinforce your message and be like, by the way, it's an X billion-dollar market, just to clear that from their mind. But don't lead with it, because to your point about it's going to sound like everyone else, no one is going to an investor saying, we are entering the declining fax machine market.
Right. Yeah. Our target market is newspapers.
Which, to be honest, I feel like actually will make a comeback over the next 2 to 3 years.
It could be. Yeah.
I think people are going to get really jaded with click ad and clickbait ad driven online news sources, particularly as some of the big tech companies get more politicized. And we've seen like private equity companies demolish historical newspapers. And I think you're actually going to see a new startup or a handful of new startups emerge in the next couple of years that are focused on traditional print. And I do think it'll come back in the same way that actually direct mail has made a comeback because everyone stopped doing it. So then it created an opportunity.
Yeah, nobody does it. So now there's an opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you could very well be onto something here. Yeah, there's something about having the physical connection as well, whether it's a printed book or a newspaper or face-to-face meeting versus Zoom. Yeah, you get Zoom fatigue, you get online, fatigue for all sorts of things. And so doing something in the real world has value.
We can only be on our screens for so long. And I think, I also think particularly with Gen Z, with all the mental health issues that are being brought up with that Gen Z is facing because of a life lived online since basically 3-4 years old.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see a desire for ways to take a break from being on the screen. And it'll also have, to me, again, it's funny we're talking about this because I've never articulated these thoughts before, but like, I think about it and I'm like, it would totally fit the whole, once something is retro, it's cool.
Right.
And it would totally fit that retro idea of like reading an old school newspaper. And I don't know, it probably wouldn't look the exact same as what we were used to with like the New York Times or the Chicago Tribune over from 50 years ago and even 20 years ago. But I'm sure, it'd probably have some level of interactivity to it, like, scan this, make the article interactive, that kind of thing. But I think there's probably a market for some like nonpartisan, subscription-based traditional newspaper that will come out. And you mentioned the idea of like, we want that connection. That's what this K-PASA elevator pitch formula is creating. It's creating connection because when you lead with them and their situation, you're developing empathy for the situation that they're in. Now, here's what's key in this. It's not just that you say, well, here is the problem. Well, here is our approach. Well, here's like, you don't talk about it like that. You have to make it sound natural, almost as if you've never thought of saying this before. It just came up off the top of your head. So what you want to do is stay away from broad, generalized statements and be really specific and dialed in and paint pictures with your words. The things you say, they should be able to like draw images in their heads as you're saying it. So like, I think a common thing you'll hear SaaS founders say, regardless of the industry that they're in, is they'll be like, insert industry is broken, right? Or insert industry is fragmented. And like, we can't really picture broken or fragmented in the way that they're talking about.
Right.
Let's take, for example, let's just spin one up here. Let's take accounting software.
Okay, sure.
So I would say the typical way to go about it would be like, small business accounting is broken. But no small business, like at an individual level, views it as a systemic problem. They just think about it through their own lens and what they've experienced. So if you tell them small business accounting is broken, they're going to be like, I don't know, is it? Like,
yeah, I
know mine doesn't work. I don't know if it doesn't work for other people. And
you're giving them something to argue with. Yeah, you're taking the brain somewhere else of like, I don't know if this is true or not. And so you've already kind of broken trust if they're thinking, I'm not sure that this is my experience or not.
Right. Now you want to take it down to the value of one person, not the industry as a whole, but the value of one individual person.
Yeah.
So the way you might change that up is using specific references, like it's the end of the month and you're trying to do your expense reports. You've got 3 receipts crumpled sitting on your desk, 2 that are in your jacket pocket from the client dinner you went to on Wednesday night. You have an email PDF from that Uber that you took last Sunday to your big event. And you're scrambling, trying to remember where all these things are, scan them, rescan them because the paper crumples, now make you have to redo it. And by the time you get through just 5 of these receipts, all of a sudden you've lost your entire morning.
Yep.
So that is far more, and you tell me, we compare small, we'll call it expense reporting is broken versus what I just said. Talk to me about what you felt through either of those versions.
The first, expense reporting is broken. Okay, cool. Yeah, it is. And it just, it's not great. It's not terrible. But then you do the second one. No, it's broken and it's terrible because I've experienced that. You've made it where it's very universal because all of us have experienced that at some point. It could be we lost one receipt. It could be that, we let them pile up for months. It could be that, it did consume so much time.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of us have had that experience and it makes it very relatable, but you're telling a story about a person and we can relate to that. We see ourselves inside that story.
And you are, well, I don't want to lead the witness here, but tell me, did you get more curious with each example I was giving or feel more like recognized or seen with each example I was giving?
Yes, without a doubt, because you're drawn into that because the examples you relate more to them. There's an emotional connection because you kind of feel that frustration as well. But yeah, so you really get drawn into the story of like, where's it going? Like, yes, these things are happening, and what our mind wants to close that loop, and so now we've got an open loop if there's a problem, and you have to keep talking now because I need to close that loop.
Right.
How do we fix this? Which if the industry is just broken, okay,
yeah,
I got nowhere to go. But now I'm in.
What's funny is, so I was literally, just freestyling that off the top of my head. But as I thought about what to say, I literally looked down and I saw there were 2 crumpled receipts on my desk because I was doing expense reporting earlier this week. So, I basically shared my own pain back to people. The other thing too about that mode of communication when you K-PASA this is the better you describe that, not only like what you will do as the listener is go from like recognizing it, feeling it, and then you'll start to think ahead to, okay, where is this going? And in a good way, meaning like you'll start to think ahead to the actual product. And that, and it's kind of like a little like Yoda Jedi mind trick here, where when I then talk about the product, the solution, you already had that seed in your mind from the way I described the problem.
Yeah.
So now when I introduce the solution or product, it's technically a reinforcement of a thought you started to have, which means you're more likely to receive that information favorably because it's not brand new, funky foreign information that you were not familiar with.
Ready to dominate your market and skyrocket your revenue? Dive into Small Fish Big Pond, delivering a world-class business that swims circles around competitors. This book is packed with powerful marketing and leadership insights guaranteed to transform your business and operate world-class. Small Fish Big Pond delivers proven strategies to sharpen your marketing message, deliver unmatched value to your clients, and guide your prospects' buying journey to one inevitable conclusion: that your company is the only solution for them. Inside, you'll find step-by-step frameworks and time-tested growth principles to attract your ideal clients, convert them, and then turn them into your passionate brand ambassadors. Grab your copy today in print, ebook, or audio at smallfishbigpond.com or on Amazon. Plus, remember, every book sale supports charity. All profits go there. Always have, always will. So dive in and make a difference. That's really smart because you're also setting up your solution to solve the problem that you've articulated. So now you've taught them what to want, and it's a solution to the problem. The solution to the problem that you introduced.
Yeah.
That they have, but you have the solution for it. So you're actually going to, come back and close that loop.
You can also use this when you are actually demoing. Like there's a couple things I want to say on demoing, but one of them is you can start to describe the elements of your product through their own Micro-KPASAs. Instead of just saying, here's this widget, here's what it does, you can frame it through the lens of a problem first, and then the approach and the solution, and then the action is you showing it to them, right? So you can use these Micro-KPASAs and just keep talking in that cycle of information to make it more and more, basically increase how it's going to be received and the favorability of it through that form of communication.
That's really, really smart.
I think the way software is demoed is really interesting. Sometimes what we'll do as a company is, in one of our services, is like demo call coaching and reviews. And it's interesting to me how often people make the same mistakes,
Sure.
whether it's the founder selling or whether they've got a sales team. And I feel like the issue is that it's called a demo. So, which is short for demonstration. And right. I don't know who was the first, maybe it was Salesforce, 15 years ago, to be like, we're going to put a button on this site and call it demo. But that created this like misunderstanding for the entire SaaS industry in every sub vertical. Because now the standard, it becomes, or like the default way of practicing is, let me get them on a call, pull up my screen share, and show them everything our product does.
Right.
And give them this like guided long form tour. And 99% of demos start with the seller pulling up the dashboard page. Like the admin panel, essentially.
Right.
And they'll be like, so here's your dashboard. And on the left side, you can do this and this and this. At the top, you can see you have your account drop down here. You can toggle between users, et cetera, et cetera. You can see your aggregate data and information here. And that's because typically when you log into software, that is the first thing you'd see.
Right.
But no one is saying when you are demoing this, you have to show it to them in the order in which they will use it. Instead, because no one's ever been like, oh my God, that dashboard page. Wow, I'm ready to buy. There's never been a sexy enough dashboard that has accomplished that. Instead, this is, bear with me for a moment while I go on this journey. I think one of the best examples for how to run a software demo is the original Super Mario on Nintendo.
Tell me more.
Now, I said, bear with me on this. Okay. So hang on here. If you remember the game, when you turn on the game, you press start, right? And the game begins and you've got da-da-da-da-da-da, right? The music starts. Mario is on the far left of your screen.
Yes.
And there's this big open world to the right of Mario, but you're oriented to the far left. And you have two choices, back or forward, run or jump. That's it. And you will immediately find out, and you kind of instinctively, because Mario's oriented to the far left and there's world to the right, you kind of instinctively would think I should move forward in time, not backwards.
Right.
But if you do turn around, you'll see you can't go anywhere. So now you've understood the game mechanic that once you're forward, you can't go back. You start running, and then you see a Koopa coming towards you. Now, because you're going this way and something's going this way, you're being told, now your mind is saying, this is probably bad. And there are two choices. Either you run into it and you die and you find out, you lose a life and you get another life and you start over. Or you hit A and you jump over the Koopa. Actually, three choices. Or you jump on top of it because you're still small, you'll die as well. So now you know, if I bop this thing, I'm going to die. I have to jump over it. Once you jump over it, you get your first brick. If you hit it, you'll notice nothing happens. Then you see bricks with a couple shiny question blocks. Shiny question blocks indicates, it's like a casino, right? I should do something. I'm going to be drawn to this. I should be attracted to it. Let me go here. You bop the question block. One of them is a coin. The other one is a mushroom. You get the mushroom and now you're big. And if you hit those blocks again, you'll notice now you can break those blocks. Then you start to see more Koopas coming at you. Then you see tunnels, and some of them you can go down or not. And then later on in the world, you have some steps. Then you have a flower, and you realize with the flower, you can spit fireballs, and that's how you kill the Koopas. And then there's the star. And then when you have the star, you're invincible and you can run through everything. And by the end of the level, you have understood every mechanic of the game. And you're ready to take on level 2 and keep going. The only thing that's going to change is the background scenery. Is it day or night? Are you upstairs or downstairs? Are you on land or are you in a castle?
Makes sense.
Everything's progressively layered in. The game does not start where you open the game, and immediately you have Mario in the middle of the screen, blocks, Koopa, star, flower, mushroom, coins, bullets, pipes, right? If all of that showed up at one time, you'd get so overwhelmed, you would never be curious enough to explore the game.
Yeah.
But since it's strategically layered in one thing at a time, you're learning as you're going and it's digestible. So that scenario I just painted of if you turn the game on and star, flower, all those things are there at one time, that is the equivalent of opening up your dashboard to start a demo. It's so much information that has no natural visual guidance to it that it's overwhelming and immediately a turnoff. And by the way, everyone else does it that way too. So it looks exactly like what they've seen before.
Right.
Versus, what if you started telling a story with this demo? What if you use this Super Mario technique and you essentially mapped out a world for them, so to speak, and you guided them one step at a time through these different things they were trying to accomplish, and you used your K-PASA, your Micro-KPASAs to explain that. And this is where you can call back to things you learned from them in Discovery. How did you learn these things in Discovery? Because you opened with your larger K-PASA, which made them feel comfortable to share detailed information about their situation with you. And then when you're demoing, you can say, let's come back to the expense reporting thing. And maybe during Discovery, they talked about how they have a team of 20 people and they can never get them to submit their receipts on time. Now, what you do is you say, in your Micro-KPASA, this is going to be, again, another freestyle of this, so you can shore this up as needed. But you mentioned earlier that you've got a team of 20 and you can never get them to submit their receipts on time. That's got to be so frustrating to deal with. We hear that from so many others as well. And it's not just that you can't get them to submit their receipts on time. If you're like those others that we've talked to, I'm sure it also involves 8 back and forth emails to each person, just reminding them. Some of them are like, hey, I'll get it done tomorrow. And then tomorrow happens and they don't do it. And then they're like, oh, my scanner is down or whatever. And then you're left having to pick up the pieces almost quite literally with one night before all the expense reports are due.
Yeah.
What we've got here is a way to organize your team without all the frustration and headaches. So if you click over here, you can see there's one universal view for your entire team, and you can actually see what stage they're at in their reporting process, because every action they take is going to auto create a step that you've defined. So if you want to create 3 steps to the process, notify them, they've acknowledged notification, they've submitted their receipts. Maybe that's 3. Maybe you need another step, which is they've started on their receipts. And then a 4th one, they've completed their receipts. It's going to auto filter them into those stages. And then based on the deadlines you set for each, it's going to start shooting them automatic reminders to get it done. And guess what? If you really wanted to, you could even set an incentive for them to complete it. Maybe they get a half day of PTO if they do this in advance. Maybe they get a $5 Starbucks card, something like that. But you don't have to worry about tracking everyone down. The system is going to be that cat herder for you.
That's
now,
really
again, I just
powerful.
totally made that up on a fake software that I don't even know necessarily exists, but I think you can get the idea.
Yeah, I'm ready to buy that one.
So that's how you Super Mario that. You strategically layer the information one by one, and that's just like, that's you getting to the first tunnel. Because now you got to talk about the next problem area they have and the part of your software you show them. And then you zoom out and you're like, by the way, all this is navigated through just this front dashboard, which will be the first thing you see when you log in. Then you can just go here, go here, or go here.
That's really smart. I think we don't think about it that way because we're so familiar with the product. Yeah. We've already connected all those dots, and we just assume that they're thinking the same thing that we are, but it's the first time they've seen it. It's something that's brand new, the concept, the screens. They're like, and just like you said, you dropped in the middle of the game and they're like, I don't know what's going on. And we're like, oh, you just do this, 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 and this. And like, I have no idea what just happened.
Yeah, you cannot ever assume your customer is as caught up on your own software as you are, because they haven't seen it before, or maybe they only saw it in a small video online, but even then that was like a highly curated marketing content. You have to meet them where they are, not get them to meet you where you are.
It's easy to forget because we have that assumed knowledge.
Again, it comes back to that bubble that we exist in. We think everyone's a product developer. Most people are not product developers.
Right. Oh, so good. Well, what's your strategy for staying composed when an investor or prospect, kind of challenges your pitch?
Ooh, good question. So I think it's going to depend on what aspect are they challenging. And I think some of the common things might be around competitors and then also around your own like growth. So how you position these things, I think, is pretty key. I think the classic things you'll see in investor decks is, with regards to competition, is the classic 4-quadrant competitive analysis slide.
Sure.
And the feature table competitive analysis slide. I am dogmatically against both of these. The 4-quadrant slide is so like easily concocted to, you just skew the axes in your favor.
Sure.
Like you literally label the axes to put you in the top right. And then like very conveniently, everyone else is in the other 3 quadrants. But it's super easy to be like, well, what if top left does X and now they're in top right? What then? They're 15 times your size. What are you going to do?
Right.
And you're like, well, we'll have customer loyalty, so it won't matter. And they'll be like, I don't believe that. And then the feature table is so much information to take in at one time. It's like the equivalent of like dashboard selling, like we talked about before, where you're going to spend all of 25, 30 seconds on that slide. And while you're talking, there's also like 18 different check marks in different places across different rows and columns. So it's really, and all the person is going to do is not listen to you and try and decipher what that table says. And then again, very conveniently, it's like, we have all the check marks. They only have 2 of the check marks. I think it also inherently, it assumes that more features wins in the market. And that has like historically never been the case, that more features is what wins. I still think an iPhone today does less than what an Android could do. And iPhones outsell Androids. Or sure. Apple has a much larger market cap, I should say. Instead of doing those, and I would say too, at a philosophical level, when you're pitching an investor, you are essentially conveying your point of view for the way the world is supposed to be. And then you come back and you're like, and here's how we fit into the world that is today. So I think there's actually a philosophical clash as well. Instead, what we do whenever possible when we're building out these decks for tech companies is We will, again, whenever possible, we will pitch category creation, and we will actually do that through you lump any relevant existing competitor or company, whether they're technically a competitor or not, anyone relevant, you lump them into one group on the left side of the slide, and you give that a name, and you put a versus sign in the middle, and then you put your logo on the right side of the slide, and you give your thing a name, like your area a name. So there's an example with a company we worked with a while back that was fintech products specifically for the Black and African diaspora in the US. And, there's Acorn, there's Robinhood, there's all these things, et cetera, that already exist. And when you actually look at it, like 91% of the user base of those products are white. So we put all these logos on the left side and we called them Robin Hood and his merry men. And we put that stat underneath. 91% of these users are white. Versus this other company on the right, we created the label of cultural fintech. So now you're creating this quite literal like line of demarcation because there's a line down the middle of the slide, but you're developing a new kind of conversation now by saying like, hey, it's great that these exist. Let them exist. They've actually conditioned the market to know that something like this is possible. But they've gone about it in such a way that ignores our market. And that's where we can enter, taking the base education that's already out there and capitalize on that through this never before seen category or area of cultural fintech. The other thing I think I mentioned was on like your growth or your traction. I think how you position this is really important. So there's a couple things I'll say here. If you've got a little bit of traction, it's almost worse than having no traction. And I say that to say like, I would say up to roughly 20K MRR. From like $1 to 20K MRR, you're likely to get feedback of like, how come you don't have more revenue yet?
Sure.
So the technique that we figured out that is a really good workaround this is I call it the revenue engine technique. The idea here is if you are still in that climb to 20, if you're making money, but you're still in that 20K or less MRR, maybe 30K, you could still pull this off. There's a good chance, even though you're making money, you don't have a reliable revenue engine established yet. Like maybe you went to a trade show in April and you got a bunch of signups through that.
Sure.
And then the next month you had some referrals come in, and then maybe like, April, May, then June was like quiet, but then July, some other, like activation happened and you got some customers through that. But like you haven't built a reliable system or engine yet where like, turnkey and the leads start flowing in. So this is where you have to reestablish the definition of pre-revenue versus post-revenue. Post-revenue doesn't have to mean we are making revenue. What it can instead mean, post-revenue can instead mean our revenue engine is figured out and it is turned on. And again, usually in most cases, when you're still in that climb to 20K, maybe 30K MRR, you have not figured out your revenue engine yet.
Yeah.
So it's more attractive to say, instead of saying we're a post-revenue company and we're doing 18K MRR, instead of that, because again, it's going to be, well, why aren't you making 30 or 40K yet? Your growth seems too slow. Versus, what if you said, we are still in pre-revenue mode and we've been making 18K a month over the last 4 months.
Very different.
Right? Now we're not trying to make money yet, but we are making money.
Yeah.
That's how attractive this product is to the market.
That's really, really good positioning.
Yep. So this is where like people think about, you'll often hear people think and talk about like this idea of storytelling and fundraising. And it's not just, do you have the meet so-and-so on slide 1, right? It's not just that, which sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't, really depends on where you're at. But like, It is that there's a micro story to be told for your traction. There's a micro story to be told for how you position your business model. There's a micro story to be told for the secondary trend that's generating momentum in your market, right? There's a secondary story to be told for why you as the founding team are credible. This is true storytelling at work. It's not just, did you have that Cinderella-like introduction where you're like, meet Pam, Pam is stressed, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
You really need to have and this is what's going to help you. If you do these micro stories effectively, now what you're doing is positioning yourself not just as a product creator, but a thought leader in the space. And that's the position you want to be in, where you're actually helping educate them on the market and the opportunity, because that becomes hard to ignore. You essentially are now, it's like you're pointing out, because of the way you're communicating, you're pointing out what was under their nose all along. They just never thought to look down.
Yeah.
And now that you've told them to look down, they cannot unsee it. And they recognize you as the illuminator of that truth. And so now they're like, this person really knows their stuff. They seem like the right person for this job. Let's keep talking to them. I think, this is what builds investment confidence.
That's really, really good. Yeah, love that. Where can people learn more about you online?
Yeah, so I'm almost annoyingly active on LinkedIn, so you can grab me there. And I'm sure in the show notes, LinkedIn's like more of like a hard to remember URL. So I think you can probably throw my
absolutely.
LinkedIn
We'll put that in the show
URL
notes
for people. But usually if you just type in Raj Nation, all one word, I'll show up. And then aside from that, our website is startuphypeman.com. We talked a lot about the K-PASA formula today. If you want a kind of like a hyper condensed, like 4-minute video that talks through that formula with a couple examples, just go to startuphypeman.com/newsletter and you'll get a video in your inbox.
Excellent. We'll make sure and link that in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
So good to have you on the show. Thanks for being on
This was
SaaS
great.
Fuel.
Thank you for the platform, the space, and for being a great both listener and conversationalist.
Excellent. Thanks again, Raj, for coming on the show and sharing your insights and resources. Man, such a fireball. I love this episode. You can learn more about Raj at startuphypeman.com and join Raj Nation. As always, all links, highlights, resources, and full show notes are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to check us out on YouTube as well. It's at Champion Leadership. We have full video episodes, outtakes, training, shorts, lots of stuff over there for you. It's super valuable and quick hits also. Thought leaders share. Share this episode with someone who loves staying sharp and thinking ahead like Raj does. Everyone who shares this week gets a personalized theme song composed by an orchestra of highly trained squirrels. What if scholarships could be the next big opportunity in AI-driven marketing? Join us next time as David Tebechnikov, CEO of Scholarship Owl, shares how brands can engage Gen Z while helping students graduate debt-free. Amazing business model here. With experience at Google and Waze, David is pioneering hyper-targeted scholarship campaigns that create real impact. Then we'll sit down with Mohan Rao, Chief Product and Technology Officer at Known Well, to discuss the intersection of product innovation, rapid scaling, and customer-driven technology development. With decades of experience in executive SaaS leadership roles and multiple successful exits, Mohan will share lessons on building products that drive mission and revenue. I will see you next time, and as always, enjoy the journey.
Thanks for listening to SaaS Fuel. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/saasfuel. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.